Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, December the 19th, 2025. Today there is a new moon. Well, okay, the new moon might be tomorrow, depends on your time zone, but certainly in the Americas there is a new moon today. And, this new moon is late Sagittarius, and I think it's a potentially important event, end of a lunar cycle, beginning of another cycle. So, what is this new cycle going to be all about? But, before I look at this new moon in great detail, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today. So here is the chart for today, set for noon, December the 19th, 2025, New York time. And you will see top right that I have a picture of a moon, but I'm being a bit misleading here. It's the moon when you can start to see it. Of course, at the time of a new moon, you can't see anything. The moon is completely dark. So as far as what's happening today, Friday, you can see that there is a lot of stuff in Sagittarius, and the moon is in Sagittarius. So when you think about the moon in Sagittarius, you think about being active and vibrant, and being able to really express oneself, and perhaps having a sense of humor, and being boundless and limitless. All those Sagittarian descriptions, but you have to remember that the moon is making a conjunction to the sun. I mean, that is the definition of a new moon. So the moon is combust. It's also making a square to Saturn and a square to Neptune. So those aspects might, in some respects, diminish the moon, at least in terms of how that sign Sagittarius expresses itself. We might want to be ourselves. We might want to be vibrant and exciting, but circumstances could make it difficult. It might just be the situation we find ourselves in, other people's attitudes. It may say something about ourselves as well. We just might feel that it's not quite the right thing to do. We might be sort of holding something back. Though the moon is, not just making a conjunction to the sun, it is making a conjunction to Venus. So Moon-Venus conjunction is pretty fortunate. I mean, there's sort of two sort of feminine planets coming together. And I know it's in Sagittarius, so Sagittarius doesn't quite work like, say, like Pisces. So if there was a Moon-Venus conjunction in Pisces, you might have said that is very sort of flowing and able to sort of move with the emotional tides. But this is in Sagittarius, and from a social perspective, even though the moon is right conjunct the sun, that might allow us to sort of be ourselves and getting on with people, at least at a superficial level. With moon conjunct Venus, it might be quite easy. So maybe the Moon-Venus conjunction is going to sort of facilitate relationships, yet Venus is making a square to Saturn. So I don't think it's a typically Sagittarian day. I think that there just could be something holding things back. But we are trying our best. Venus is making a quincunx to Jupiter. So there's Venus in Sagittarius, quincunx Jupiter in Cancer. So many of us are trying our best. We want to be free and easy, Venus in Sagittarius, but at the same time we have to deal with the complexities of other people. That other people have their feelings, and they have their reservations, and they have their limits, and maybe that's what we're trying to cope with. I mean, we might respond by going slightly over the top. Venus-Jupiter link can be about taking something too far, but it's important that we do know our limits. And also we've got a quincunx between the Sun and Uranus. So the Sun is coming to the end of Sagittarius, getting ready to move into Capricorn, and it makes an 150-degree aspect to Uranus. And this Sun quincunx Uranus, it could be quite an important aspect. It may be that we have to make a special effort to get noticed. And that might be the problem of Sun quincunx Uranus. I've already said that the moon is making a square to Saturn, square to Neptune. It's combust, so we might feel that there's just something holding us back, and therefore we might have to feel that we have to make a special effort to get people's attention. But maybe we'll go a little bit too far with that Sun quincunx Uranus. So let's just turn to Australia. We set the chart for noon Sydney time as a representative of Australia and New Zealand. So if you are in Australasia, moon is earlier in the sign, and so it's still quite a long way from a new moon. It's quite a long way from making that square to Saturn and Neptune. So I think that if you are in Australia and New Zealand or East Asia, it might be a day which is possibly less complicated, because you're not going to have those squares to Saturn and Neptune, and you're just going to be able to get into the fact that the moon is in Sagittarius, and you can just be yourself, and you don't have to worry too much about other people's problems and issues. And okay, you will have to deal with moon square Saturn tomorrow, Saturday, but not today. So probably a more straightforward day in Australia or New Zealand than in the Americas, and perhaps you'll have more freedom of action. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the Sun at the center of the solar system. By the way, don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. Now we still have this 15-degree aspect between Jupiter and Pluto. It's getting quite close. When I say a 15-degree aspect, I mean sort of multiples of 15 degrees. We can see these repeating cycles of 15 degrees, and there's Jupiter, there's Pluto. I know it's not immediately obvious, but what you've got is you've got a 24th harmonic conjunction between Jupiter and Pluto. I have already talked about it, but it's getting really quite close now, and I would have thought that today is as close as it can get. So if you've got Jupiter making that aspect with Pluto, many of us might feel today that there's just something we've got to do, that things aren't quite good enough, that we have to take things further. Jupiter and Pluto is perhaps about making a revolutionary change, not necessarily to other people, but maybe to ourselves, and that's indeed where it should start. Before worrying what other people are doing and criticizing them, have we really got our own house in order? Are we doing things as well as we possibly can? And with that Jupiter-Pluto micro aspect, we could be quite hard on ourselves. Just to make it clear what I mean by a 24th harmonic conjunction. Let me just show you the 24th harmonic conjunction. I already did this a few days ago, but just to remind you. So if we look at the 24th harmonic, multiplying every planet by 24. I know that this is a technical issue that you might not want to hear about it. And I've been thinking about this. By the way, I'm sorry to go on a diversion here. I've been thinking about this. Issues like, how do I explain harmonics and midpoints? It's not really a very sort of general thing, and it's on superficially quite complex. And I think probably the answer is to do special videos, maybe instructional videos. And I think I'm about to set up a membership part of this channel. I don't know, I think I'll probably charge $10 a month for it. I'm sorry I have to do it, but if I'd have a membership channel, but I think I would probably be doing videos on sort of more technical things and have a sort of teaching videos and sort of do that sort of once a week. And I'm still thinking about it, but I'm trying to set up a membership channel, and I probably will be doing that over the next few days. But anyway, if we look at the 24th harmonic of the heliocentric 24th harmonic, there is the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction. You see, it's getting it's really, really close, and it's about a degree apart. And the reason it's not exact is because when you have a harmonic, when you have a 24th harmonic, you multiply every error by 24. So if Jupiter and Pluto are 3 arc minutes apart in the main chart, when you look at the 24th harmonic, you have to multiply that 3 by 24. So the error gets multiplied, or the orb, should I say, gets multiplied by 24. But still, I think from a harmonic perspective, it's pretty close, and it does represent the fact that at a higher level, there is an urge to improve, an urge to make things better. And not just about today. It's this Jupiter-Pluto conjunction is going to be around for maybe the next week. So things could always be better, and it's important not to blame other people straight away if things aren't absolutely perfect, because there are always going to be things we can do ourselves to improve the situation. So I think now I want to look at things from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, December the 19th, 2025. Aries. A lot of planets in Sagittarius. We have been having a lot of planets in Sagittarius. It's been building up, and it's very much there. It's all sort of coming together. We've got a new moon in Sagittarius now. Okay, maybe today, maybe tomorrow. It's in a fire sign, and so Aries. I think that this should be very, very motivating, and it's important that you don't feel that things have to just necessarily stay in one place. That you have to be satisfied with the status quo, and you can move beyond your existing situation without necessarily having to break anything, without having to have a dramatic performance, regard everything as a conflict. People might be holding you back. You might think they're holding you back, but I don't think that's how it need be. Instead, it's about sort of elevating the situation, taking things perhaps to a new level without anything changing. It's like on the surface, nothing changes, but then everything changes, and you have to start with your perception of the situation, and you just need to look at things in a new way. What seemed to be an obstacle is just nothing. You can just move beyond it. So if you do feel dissatisfied, that maybe things have got rather boring, it's no one's fault. It's just that things have changed, and that you have reached a stage where you are ready to move sort of above and beyond. And so you don't have to be satisfied with what's in front of you. And it in many cases may be a question of opening your eyes and asking questions, being ready to see what is available. I mean, you don't know what is available until you try, until you give it a go. And so Aries, you have to be adventurous with these Sagittarian planets. And of course we've got a new moon, and of course a new moon is about a new cycle. Something is coming to an end, and maybe you're very glad that it's all coming to an end. This part of a lunar cycle just before the new moon, it's just everything feels a bit dead. It's going nowhere, and of course things are often slow at this time of year. It's just before Christmas, and things are slowly grinding to a halt. But with this new moon, I know it is still before Christmas. You start to see the seeds of something new, and with this new moon happening relatively close to the end of the year, it almost is like the beginning of a new year. I mean, I know it's kind of still in mid-December, but it might feel that 2026 is really here, and that you're just aware that things are changing, and things are changing for the better, and you are changing for the better, and change starts with you. But I don't want to give the impression that everything is kind of sort of pie in the sky. It's not. You are able to be very persistent, and if there is anything that you want, then you can certainly make it happen, because Mars is in Capricorn now. I mean, it's been in Capricorn for a few days. Mars in Capricorn, it's a great sign for Mars to be in. If you're an Aries, it's exalted in Capricorn, and this can be about whatever it is you want to do, whatever you want to put your mind to. You can move forward, and you can make good progress, even on a material level. So it's not just about you sort of flying off into the ether. It's not just what it's about. It's about you sort of elevating yourself and really understanding what you can do. So, ideally, Aries, this is not a time to be complaining. It's a time to be sort of acting, and acting with confidence. And, if you are able to be confident and also determined, other people are going to pick up on it. And I think that, right now, Aries, your social skills are probably improving in quite a major way, and you can get people's attention, and you come over as being quite an exciting person, and you know how to get closer to people. I mean, I'm not necessarily talking about close relationships here, but you know how to break the ice. If you make the effort. I mean, there are all sorts of reasons why you might feel you can't break the ice, but you don't know if you don't try. So if you are able to put yourself in a position where you are being sociable, where people are listening to you, where you're responding to what other people are doing, then I do think that all of this looks pretty good for you. So so overall, Aries, I'm pretty optimistic about today, and I'm not just optimistic about today. I think that with this new moon, I think that things are definitely getting better for you. I mean, not that they're necessarily bad right now, but I think that they could be even better. Taurus, not everything is simple. You cannot expect everything to be completely easy. I mean, I think that you would like things to be easy. I mean, you're a Taurus. I mean, Taurus is known to being sort of quite sort of down to earth. You don't appreciate unnecessary complications, and you would like things to proceed in an orderly fashion, but I just don't think that they necessarily will. And it's not even because there are going to be difficult events or anything like that. I think it might just be your own perceptions, and you take something that is straightforward, maybe everyone does it, and for some reason right now you might find yourself analyzing it and thinking about it and worrying about it. And there is a capacity for worry here. I don't want to make you worried just for the sake of it, but you take something and in your mind you pursue it to the next level. You think, well, what would happen now if this were to happen and that were to happen? And your imagination in some respects, may be quite vivid, maybe vivid in a negative way. You see how things could go wrong. Well, things could always go wrong. There are always, possibilities of bad things happening. But, we do have to think about probability. probability. I think as humans we often get our probabilities wrong. I mean, we get worried about things happening which are very unlikely, and we obsess about them. Yet we do that, and we sort of ignore the much more likely event. I mean, for example, I think, I'm 63. I think that my chances of being dead in the next year, statistically, you can look at the life tables, because I've got Taurus rising, by the way, so this might to an extent apply to me. I forget what the precise number is, but according to life tables, I think my chance of dying over the next year is about 1.5%, something like that. I mean, it's quite small, but it's a real chance. And obviously, as you get older, your chances of dying in the next year do increase. I mean, that's just the way it goes. And I think that the age where you are least likely to die in the next year is 14. I mean, 14 is I think it's 14 is the golden year when your chances of dying are at their absolute lowest, something like that, somewhere in the mid-teens. But after 14, 15, it just goes up and up and up. But so we worry about all sorts of tiny possibilities happening, but then we don't worry about the fact that it's always a much larger possibility of us just dropping dead. So what I'm saying is, try to get a perspective on any worries you have. What is the real probability? And probably the real probability is pretty low, but you're still obsessing about it. So I mean, I'm not saying it is happening. I absolutely do not want to create a problem that doesn't exist. But Taurus, I just think that there is a chance that you just take something too far, and that might be your response to all these planets in Sagittarius. I mean, I know Sagittarius is supposed to be quite an optimistic sign, but we shouldn't forget that the moon is in Sagittarius, is making a conjunction to the sun. By definition, you've got a new moon, but conjunction to the sun means it's combust, it's square Saturn, it's square Neptune. You could be a little bit all over the place with that, and you shouldn't forget that the moon in Sagittarius is in mutual reception to Jupiter. That is a fortunate relationship, and somehow you have to take a capacity to worry about nothing and to change it, and to say, well, in fact, Taurus, you have the capacity to really understand things. It's good to ask questions. It's good to ask about all the things that could happen, good and bad, but you don't want to get emotionally involved with it. You want to do it as a practical exercise, and that can actually make things better for yourself, and it can put you in a more secure position. But you just have to be logical, and you have to, for example, bear in mind and consider the probabilities. And also today, Taurus, we have a quincunx between Venus and Jupiter. And quincunx can be quite a difficult aspect. So as far as what this quincunx means, Venus is of course your ruler. If it's quincunx Jupiter, there's just a possibility, well, it might be more of the same, that you do take something too far. Jupiter can be an excessive planet. So you think about something, you get involved in something, and you want something else, but it's not necessarily easy. And it may also be a question about how you deal with information. Information comes your way. What do you do with it? How do you use it in a constructive way? And so that's something you need to think about. So I think that a major theme today, Taurus, is just not taking things too far, not being an extremist. I think you could be an extremist. I'm not talking about necessarily political extremism, but just deciding to put all your focus on one area maybe just being a little bit obsessive. And I just don't necessarily think that that is helpful. And maybe what you've got to do is sort of tune into something else. Mars is now in Capricorn, and Mars in Capricorn, Capricorn is a Taurus friendly sign. So Mars in Capricorn does mean that you can put your energy into something which which can uplift you, can bring you up rather than drag you down, and maybe you can do that with the help of another person. I mean, that's certainly possible. Gemini. We kind of have a new moon in Sagittarius. Okay, well, the new moon might not be until tomorrow if you're not in the Americas, but yes, there's still sort of a new moon feel to the day. And this new moon in Sagittarius, well, obviously, Sagittarius is the opposite sign to Gemini. So this new moon in Sagittarius might well be about the other. Could be about relationships, very likely to be about relationships in a pure sort of theoretical way, with four planets in Sagittarius plus a new moon. And you may be thinking about how much freedom you have, how much you have to take into account other people's needs and other people's whims. People can do something sort of unannounced, unexpected, and then you have to respond. You don't want to spend all your time responding, but you kind of are aware today that you're not necessarily a completely free actor. You do have to consider what else is going on, what other people are doing. Now, this is, in some respects, quite neutral. I mean, it's not a bad thing. And it's just that if you are doing anything today, you've just got to realize that you're not alone, that the impact of your actions is potentially felt by other people, and there are constraints. You don't have complete freedom. I mean, you never have complete freedom. We never have complete freedom. I'm speaking as someone who has Sun in Gemini, and who I like to think of myself as being fairly independent-minded, but however independent-minded I am, there are always constraints. That's just the way it is, and I think that just at the moment you're particularly aware of these constraints, and you may also be aware of your responsibilities, because the moon in Sagittarius, it is making it's making the conjunction to the sun, but it's also making a square to a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So moon in particular makes a square to Saturn. So moon square Saturn can well be about responsibility, and is that a bad thing? Not necessarily. I mean, Saturn is doing a good job in Pisces, I think. I mean, I know that Saturn. We thought Saturn was in Aries, and it went retrograde. Now it's in Pisces, and that Saturn in Pisces, it's a reminder that we have things we need to get together. It's all about responsibility. It's about obligation, and for some of us, it might be about our work, our career. Maybe we thought we'd sorted it all out, then we realized we haven't sorted it all out. And with Moon Square Saturn, there's just a reminder here that we absolutely need to get ourselves together, and we can get ourselves together. And maybe that's part of what the new moon is all about. And it's not just that we've made our own decision. Maybe the way other people have responded to us, and even what other people are saying, we might not like what other people are saying, but if we're prepared to listen, I think that there's a good chance we can actually benefit. But don't think, Gemini, that you have no control, no power. You are a Gemini. Gemini can be quite a vocal, communicative sign, and right now you're able to communicate with, I think, real power. You can say what's on your mind. You can also consider your environment. You're not going to be completely spontaneous because the moon is square Saturn, but maybe with that moon square Saturn, you're able to think about what you're going to say. You're going to plan it, and you're going to come up with the right words. And if need be, if it's a high pressure situation, you may be able to say exactly the right thing. And your carefully chosen words can potentially make a huge difference. Cancer. It's a day probably when you're feeling that you can't be quite as easy and free as you would like to be. I mean, it's obvious that nothing is straightforward, and that there are things that you are supposed to be doing. I mean, it would be great if you got some help, you got some support, but I don't think that you can necessarily assume that support is there. It may be a day when you have to do things on your own, and there are advantages in doing things on your own. If you are trying to get something together with another person, it can be difficult. I mean, it's always nice when people cooperate, but the trouble about cooperation is that there can often just be a communication issue. People coming at a problem from different angles, and they come together and nothing works. And so it could be the case, Cancer, that if something important needs to be done, you should probably do it on your own, as much as is possible. Now, you might think that that's unfair. Why should you have to do it on your own? Surely you can get help. You can let someone else take the strain or part of the strain. But in the long run, it just might be easier if you just do it yourself. And part of a reason for this is the moon is square Saturn, and it's also conjunct the sun, because by definition we've got a new moon coming up, and so moon square Saturn can be about two people having a disagreement. You find that the other person is sort of floating off, maybe like a balloon, or maybe they've got their own priorities which they're not being entirely clear about, and you're trying to understand what those priorities are. And it could be difficult, but so with this moon square Saturn, that could well represent social irritation, and so you cannot get on with everyone. And even if you are getting on with someone, how well is it going to work? And, there is a slightly sort of complicated or contradictory thing going on, is that we do have a moon conjunct Venus. So we have moon conjunct Venus, we have moon square Saturn. So can we see those as being completely different sort of energies? I mean, moon conjunct Venus, you would think that Venus is a planet of relationships, but with moon conjunct Venus, you could say, oh well, relationships are going to work fine. It's a good sort of relationship thing. But then moon square Saturn says something completely different. So what is the truth of the matter? I mean, it could be that a relationship works well, moon conjunct Venus, and then you run into problems. So with relationships, what starts well quickly becomes a problem. So what do you do then? Well, maybe, with Venus in Sagittarius, moon in Sagittarius as well, you don't hang around. If you are finding that you and another person are getting on well with each other, you've got plenty to say, you've got plenty to share, then enjoy the moment, but just quickly move on. I mean, that is one approach. It might also be the case of you pick and choose. You decide who you want to spend your time with. There might be moon Venus experiences, moon Venus in Sagittarius, people who you can get on really well with, where there's no restriction, it's all sort of easy. It's moon and Venus in Sagittarius. You can have fun contacts with another person. They're also productive and maybe even liberating. But then there are other people, moon square Saturn, people you don't get on with. You might not know that you don't get on with them, but in the end it quickly becomes clear there's a problem. So I think that there is an element here from a social perspective of you making choices. You don't have to be friends with everyone. You don't have to spend your time with everyone. And I think that you should be focusing on the right people. What you should be looking for in terms of relationships today. I mean, you may not be looking for anything in terms of relationships. I have to talk about relationships, but it depends on your circumstances. But you're looking for a sort of a light-hearted approach. Moon, Venus, the Moon and Venus in Sagittarius, something no strings attached, where no one wants anything. But what you want to avoid is that Moon square Saturn. That could be difficult. Another aspect of that Moon square Saturn could be about having differences of opinion about things which are stupid. I mean, Moon square Saturn, politics, religion. That could be a way the Moon square Saturn works. Now, Cancer, I absolutely do not want to give the impression that it's going to be a bad day. It's not going to be a bad day. It needn't be a bad day. Don't forget that the Moon is in mutual reception with Jupiter by sign. Moon is in Sagittarius. Jupiter's in Cancer. They're in mutual reception. That says something about you. That says something about your luck. That indicates that you really can get yourself together. You can be very productive. And going back to what I said right at the beginning, Cancer, the important things, you can do them, and you don't, I don't think, need anyone else's help. Not really. And so, if you attend to the things that matter, I think that you'll make good progress. And as far as the social side of things, some people can be great. They can make your life more interesting and more fun, but other people can be just a drain on your resources. So socially, I think it might be quite important that you make the right choices. Leo, try as hard as you can to enjoy yourself today. I mean, we have a lot of planets in Sagittarius. We've got a new moon in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a fire sign, and so with all these planets in Sagittarius, you have an opportunity to really be yourself, and that should maybe be your main priority. And so you've got these planets in a fire sign. You are a fire sign, and so you are reminded of who you are and what you can do. So don't restrict yourself. And if there's something you would like to do that's life enhancing, then Leo, I would suggest that you get on with it, and you don't have to take it too seriously. I think that is quite important, not to take anything too seriously, and not to overanalyze things. Because the moon, the moon is in Sagittarius, but it is making a square to Saturn, and that Moon square Saturn could, under certain circumstances, spoil the fun. And why might it spoil the fun? Because you're being over analytical. Perhaps you're just thinking about something just too much, and you're making something maybe unnecessarily complicated, and you have to ask yourself whether that's the right thing to do. Although with complications, just because something is complicated doesn't necessarily mean that it's a problem. If something is complicated, then you need to have a sense of humor. You always need a sense of humor, even if you're dealing with something very serious. But don't make something more difficult than it actually is. And try to always sort of give yourself freedom of maneuver, and do think about other people. And the moon is making a conjunction to Venus in Sagittarius. I mean, you could say that from a relationship perspective, that's great. I mean, Sagittarius is a sign that can be about enjoying other people's company, but it's not a sign about serious relationships, serious one-to-one relationships, all that sort of emotional stuff. That's not really what Sagittarius is about. And so you want to avoid serious people. I think that is important. Now, there's nothing wrong with serious people, but yes, people can just be a real weight on your shoulders, particularly if they're over emotional. I mean, there's a place for being emotional, but I don't think today, no, I do think that emotions should, by and large, be avoided, and instead, take every moment as it occurs. Don't take anything too seriously, and also remember that the sun is still on the Venus-Mars midpoint. You can see that in the chart. So there is the sun. It's sort of 5 degrees from Mars. It's 5 degrees from Venus. Yeah, it's on the Venus-Mars midpoint, and then that says something about you. After all, the sun is your ruler, and so with the sun on the Venus-Mars midpoint, I think that does allow you to be yourself and to be attractive and to get other people's attention. But again, getting other people's attention, why would you want to get other people's attention? Because you maybe just, you want some support, you want some encouragement, you want to enjoy yourself. Maybe you don't want to enjoy, maybe on your own you feel there's a limits to what you can do, but I mean that's not true, by the way, but you might feel that you need outside support and outside encouragement, and it's there because you're someone that can get noticed, for all the right reasons. So do make the most of it, and it is an attractive aspect, Sun on the Venus-Mars midpoint, it's we've got also we've got the new moon coming up, and that is on the Venus-Mars midpoint. So it's quite sort of a Venus-Mars new moon, and so the concepts of attractiveness at the moment do matter. And if you want to be attractive, if you want to be noticed, then I think that really can happen. So I think, Leo, it can be a good day. It doesn't matter the fact that the moon is square Saturn. Yeah, we've got a new moon. The moon is conjunct the sun, but it's not the sun that's combust. It's we normally think about the moon being burnt out by the sun, but you are the sun, and so for you, this new moon can be something of a new beginning. And it's a new moon in Sagittarius, and you might find some sort of new aspect of yourself and your life that you want to start to develop, and that can really start to unfold. In the last couple of weeks, less than couple of weeks of the year. So as you move into January, so I think this new moon for you, Leo, looks pretty good. Virgo. It might be a time, Virgo, where you want to just shore things up. You want to make sure that everything is done properly, and you are thinking about what can go wrong. I mean, it's natural to think about what can go wrong, and it's not just you. I think that there is a worry going on, for everyone. Again, I'm not singling you out, and maybe it's because we've just had Saturn Neptune conjunction, a heliocentric Saturn Neptune conjunction. Saturn and Neptune are still, they're pretty close to one another. They are getting closer, and at the moment we've got a new moon coming up. That new moon is square Saturn and Neptune. So you are thinking about that, and you are thinking that you can't assume that everything is going to be fine, that everything is going to go to plan. Things can happen, and being a Virgo, you like to think about all of these potential events, and maybe you want to perhaps prepare yourself for them, and a bit of preparation might not be a bad idea. But what you don't want to do is to undermine your own security through your own concerns, by thinking about something too much. And because right now we've got the moon in Sagittarius. It's making a square to Saturn. It's making a square to Neptune. It's conjunct the sun, and the conjunct the sun. I know that's the definition of a new moon, but it can be problematic because the moon is combust, and so you might be wondering, how long is it going to last? How long can you be safe and secure where you are? What could go wrong? And so it's good to think about the future and to think about the possibilities of the future. But on the other hand, you don't want to allow your imagination to go into overdrive. And this this Saturn Neptune influence, may say quite a lot about other people. And not everyone is constructive. Some people just may be a real drain on your resources. They're a damper. They prevent you from being yourself. They prevent you from relaxing. Maybe part of you, you do want to relax and be comfortable. And your comfort may be undermined perhaps by the wrong people, or by people who, they're usually fine, but today they're rather jarring. So you ask yourself, what are the threats to your security? What is making you feel uncomfortable, and how do you respond? It could be that someone is being unreasonable. They're taking up just too much of your time. Or it could be that they've got something to say which is quite legitimate. Maybe you're being too comfortable and you're focusing too much on your own particular set of interests, and you've got to have a more expansive approach. Think about all the things that are going on, and perhaps make a few adjustments. I think that would be important. But maybe part of a problem today, again, I don't want to suggest there is a problem. Okay, it's not necessarily a problem, that there's just something that is not brought to a satisfactory conclusion, or maybe just something pending. And that may be connected with the fact that we've got a new moon. It's the very end of a lunar cycle, and there's still something that is unresolved. So what is it that's unresolved? Something needs to be said, something needs to be talked about, something needs to be moved forward to the end. It's not just something just not quite over the finish line. And so under those circumstances, Virgo, well, what would you do? And it could be that what is required on your part is just swift action. You need to say something, and you haven't said it for reasons best known to yourself. Maybe you felt that if you were open and honest, it might just be too disruptive. But there is a place for honesty, and your carefully chosen words said at the right time can really move everything on and can get people's attention. And once everyone realizes there is an issue, people can start to do something about it, and start to work towards creating a satisfactory finish. I'm not going to use the word closure. I'm not particularly keen on that word closure, but maybe closure is the right word, because it is the end of a lunar cycle. It's a time to be tying things up, and if something is unresolved, it needs to be resolved quickly, because then you can start to move into a new lunar cycle and enjoy it, enjoy the new challenges, the new opportunities, and say goodbye to some aspects of the past which you've just you're done with. Libra. Venus is making a quincunx to Jupiter. That aspect, Venus quincunx Jupiter, might sound, rather obscure, but quincunx in astrology is an important aspect. 150 degrees. You've got Venus in Venus in Sagittarius, a quincunx Jupiter in Cancer. And that Venus quincunx Jupiter could have quite a sort of a challenging dimension, something that you don't really want to get involved with, but you know you have to get involved with it. And so with Venus, if you think about Venus quincunx Jupiter, you'd like intrinsically just to be free. You would just like to be doing whatever feels good, going where you like, saying what you like, but you're not entirely comfortable about it. And Jupiter represents a pressure. It's telling you that something needs to be paid attention to. And Jupiter is a very fortunate planet. Particularly now when it's in Cancer, it's exalted. It's in mutual reception to the Moon, and it just may be, Libra, that there's something really good out there that you can take advantage of, but maybe you're not taking advantage of it. You're focusing on something else. You can't be bothered. You're concerned that what would happen if you were to get involved. You might not be happy with that situation. And so think about it. Are you really making the most of things? And you may perhaps, Libra, be tempted to be just a little too trivial, just to look too much at the short term, at the demands of the present, and not thinking about what else can be achieved. And so this Venus quincunx Jupiter, it's a good thing. It's a good thing that you are confronted with something that you are not properly integrating. And I like to use this word integrate when talking about a quincunx, because quincunxes are about integration, and they're often about something you're perhaps refusing to integrate. And that Jupiter in Cancer is perhaps something about the structure of your ambitions. It's about the direction you're going, and right now you're not thinking about it. That could be seasonal, and seasonal because it's what is it, Friday the 19th, it's nearly Christmas, you're perhaps winding down, and maybe you shouldn't be winding down. It's just another day, Friday. I mean, it's not a holiday. At least it's not a holiday in the United States. I don't think it's a holiday in Europe. It's not a holiday. Of course it's not a holiday. So what should you be doing? There's just something of a practical, something practical that might be connected with your ambitions, that you're not doing it because you perhaps don't think there's any point, but it's getting to you. And so perhaps you should try to integrate it. And if there's something that needs to be done, which I think really could work to your benefit, then I would suggest you go and do it. And additionally, I know that it's important to have fun and to enjoy oneself. Don't forget that Venus is starting to make a square to Saturn. Now, this Venus square Saturn, it's about a couple of degrees apart. So, over the weekend, that Venus square Saturn, I think it's over the weekend, the Venus square Saturn becomes exact. And so, when does that become exact? This Venus square Saturn, I think it's Venus square Saturn. Yeah, it's on. It's Sunday, maybe late on Sunday morning, Sunday morning London time. I make it 5:09 a.m. So it's getting there. And so Venus square Saturn means that there is something there which is just preventing you from just letting go, enjoying yourself, and perhaps that's a good thing. It's just a reminder that you've got to think about the real world and your place in it, and it's just not a time to just be doing nothing. I mean, I know, Libra, you perhaps didn't want to hear that, but again, I think it is potentially a good thing. This Venus square Saturn. So it's two on the surface, two very different energies, Venus quincunx Jupiter, Venus square Saturn. But really, it's all coming back to the same thing. It's coming back to this idea, Libra, that you're not making the most of things, that there's just something you need to pay attention to, something that could be good for you. And also with Venus square Saturn, Venus in Sagittarius square Saturn in Pisces, something has been done, but has it been done properly? And you might have done something, but you really only half did it. It's good up to a point, but it could be done better. And that also links in with the fact that we have a micro aspect, a heliocentric micro aspect between Jupiter and Pluto. Jupiter and Pluto is always wanting to make things better, self-improvement. So don't be satisfied, don't be complacent, and don't feel that you can just fritter the day away. I don't think. Well, you can fritter the day away if you want, but I certainly wouldn't recommend it. Scorpio. We have a new moon coming up. New moon coming up in Sagittarius. So this new moon in Sagittarius does not impact you directly. It's not in Scorpio. It's not in a fixed sign. It's probably a new moon that, if you want, you can just avoid it. I mean, it is quite close to Mars, but Mars is 4 degrees apart. But maybe it's close enough to make some difference, because you've got this new moon at 28 degrees Sagittarius. You've got Mars at 3 or 4 degrees Capricorn. So yeah, I mean, it does have some influence on you, but it might be fairly marginal. But we do have to consider, if it were to have an influence, what kind of influence might it be? And because this new moon is in Sagittarius, it might say something about money. I mean, it is a sort of time of year where people often are concerned about money. I mean, you've got Christmas and all the expenditure involved with that. It's the end of the year as well. How much money have we got? Are we going to survive next year? And so that might be how you experience this new moon. There's a certain uncertainty there. You're just not entirely sure how things are going to work out, but it's a new moon. And, because it's a new moon, you can make a start. You can look at things in a new way. And, this new moon, it's in late Sagittarius. And so, what I've been saying about these late degree new moons, because we've been having a lot of late degree new moons recently, is that these late degree new moons, almost have the quality of full moons, because they're about an ending, and they're about a realization late. It's almost feels late. It's the end of the year. End of Sagittarius. We've got the solstice coming up in a couple of days. And so you maybe realize something about money, and that says something about your future behavior, your future actions. And so perhaps you are preparing for the future, through your actions, and you'd realize, what needs to be done, what needs to be changed, because you've got a lot of planets in Sagittarius as well. And we've got also, we've got the moon conjunct Sun, the new moon. We've also got the moon conjunct Venus. I mean, Venus is a planet connected with money. And so when we talk about money, we're not necessarily talking about it in a negative way. I mean, you need to be aware about what you have and what you need, but it could also be an awareness on your part that there have been ways of making money, collecting money, which you've perhaps been neglecting. So there is certainly a financial side to it, and this might not be entirely welcome. You'd perhaps like to be thinking about other things, but it's not entirely easy. But don't forget, Scorpio, that Mars is now in Capricorn. Mars is your ruler. It's in an earth sign. It's exalted in Capricorn. That says something about you. It says something about your priorities. And with Mars in Capricorn, you are able to move forward and, and achieve stuff, and in the process be able to look after your best financial interests. You can do this really, very well. So if you're feeling that there are financial things that need your attention, then I would suggest that you go for it. You really try your hardest, because I think that you can really make things much easier for yourself, financially. I mean, I'm sorry to talk about money. I mean, but I do think that money, all things being equal, seems to be quite important at the moment, with this new moon. But money aside, if money isn't an issue, or perhaps once you've dealt with whatever financial issues you do have to deal with, I think that you're going to be able to come over pretty well. I think your ability to get on with people is going to be good. You'll come over as maybe quite a unifying figure. If other people are finding it difficult to get on with each other, you can create change, and you can create some kind of unity around yourself. So if you are socializing, if you're trying to organize anything on a social level, I think, Scorpio, that you're going to really be able to do a good job, and you're going to be able to stay in control. And also, I think that you can bring people together. Sagittarius, we got a new moon in your sign. Okay, this new moon might be today, might be tomorrow. Certainly, if you're in the United States, the new moon is today. In fact, the new moon is today, this evening, in the Americas in general. And so, the new moon in your sign, it represents perhaps the culmination of all these planets in Sagittarius, and you're thinking about yourself and what you can present. And this new moon is conjunct Venus. You've got moon conjunct Venus, so moon conjunct Venus means that you're able to really come over as a fun and pleasant person. I mean, you can come over as a fun, pleasant person. Doesn't mean you will, but I think that you certainly have the ability in that department. And so, Sagittarius, don't be afraid of, just, being yourself. There's nothing much you have to hold back, although we shouldn't forget that, Venus is starting to make a square to Saturn. I mean, the sun is this new whole world. In fact, the whole new moon is square Saturn. So, although you certainly have the capacity for being, a real Sagittarian, free, open, maybe blunt, that Saturn could be holding things back. You're aware of a restraint. So where might that restraint come from? Well, the restraint could come from your family. I mean, when you're around your family, you may not be able to fully express yourself as much as you would like. Now, this might mean that you should, stay away from your family. By all means, socialize, try to get on with people. But when your family are involved, something happens, and you're not fully able to, be yourself. Also, in terms of entertainment, if you're trying to do anything fun at home, wherever home might be, or may just be on familiar ground, but when you're at home, it's not the place where you're going to be completely light and free and fun-loving. When you're on your home turf, you're just going to be too self-conscious. And that means that if you want to have a fun day, probably it's best to go somewhere different, somewhere where you don't have responsibility. Like you always have your responsibility if things are happening in your own home. It's too much responsibility to enjoy yourself, and you've got the minutiae of home life and the various details, and it's just not you at the moment. I mean, okay, maybe you should be paying attention to your home. Maybe there's something grounding here. Saturn square, Saturn square the sun, Saturn square the moon. Yeah, I mean, that is possible. And, if you can, if you have to be on familiar territory, it's important as much as possible to really to kind of let go. You don't want to take anything too seriously. Let things go through you. If you're open, you let the energy just go through you. You don't resist it. It just goes through you and doesn't cause any harm. But if you tense up, and if you start preparing for a struggle, as you see, I don't know, bad vibes starting to develop, well, then you give the potential for the negative. You give it space. You give it room. You give it manifestation. So what you don't want to do is manifest the negative by meeting it, by greeting it, by tensing up. So the tenser you become, the more difficult things end up. So you want to have as little tension as possible, and that might be another reason why you do need to steer clear of your home ground, and perhaps even steer clear of members of your family. I mean, there's nothing wrong with members of your family, but just today, maybe into tomorrow, with Saturn having such a powerful influence, all of those Sagittarius planets, which could be so positive, could, in a worst case scenario, be just ground to a halt by Saturn. And I would just be inclined to see Saturn short term as just being something negative. You don't necessarily want to involve yourself with it. I mean, I know there's a different view. You could argue that Saturn represents legitimate responsibility. You cannot be totally free and open, because you've got to consider other things. You've got to create structure. Yeah, that is possible, but I think it's perhaps better to see things as a choice. And if you want to have a fun day, then just avoid things that could spoil that fun. Capricorn. Mars is, of course, continuing to move through your sign, and I hope that you're enjoying Mars in Capricorn. It's such a nice change to have a planet in an Earth sign, to have a planet in your sign, and it allows you to think about the things which are important to you, and yeah, to be able to sort of give it your best shot. And that's something that you very much can. And it's not necessarily something that is necessarily, it's not something that is happening in public. You don't have to feel that you have to be noticed, that you have to be seen and heard. You don't. Your best work is quite possibly done on your own, away from other people. Where there are other people, potentially there are problems, and it works both ways. Other people might waste your time, you might waste their time, or you might be regarded as being a block on whatever it is that other people want to do. So, today, I don't think that you should feel any great sort of obligation in a social sense. And if you can be away from the action, I think that in most cases that is the best approach. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you can't be friendly and sociable. There is a conjunction between the Sun and Venus. I mean, okay, it's 5 degrees apart, but it's there. Sun-Venus conjunction. Saturn is kind of picking up on that Sun-Venus conjunction. We just had the Sun square Saturn. We've got Venus applying to Saturn. So with Saturn squaring Sun-Venus, you can, in a limited sense, be a good person to have around in short bursts. I don't think that you want to spend too long with any one person, because it just might become difficult, and you might regard yourself as um, being in the wrong place. And yeah, and with that Venus square Saturn, Venus square Saturn can be about you maybe bringing something to a halt. That could be how it works. Venus can be about someone wanting something from you, and you having your own ideas, and you being regarded as being actually quite unhelpful. I mean, you're trying to be helpful, you're trying to be realistic, but still, you might be seen as a limiting force. Though there is another way of looking at Venus square Saturn. I mean, Venus square Saturn is quite a responsible aspect, and maybe you are aware of responsibilities that just have to be sorted out in your own way, perhaps relating to your work, for example, and you don't really want to deal with these responsibilities, but you have to. And so Capricorn, if something needs to be done, yeah, you can do it, and the less attention you get, the better. I think that is important. I don't think you want too much attention. If you're getting attention, then I don't think that you're going to be especially effective. And you can be effective. And as I said at the beginning, Mars is moving through Capricorn, and between now and the end of January, it will stay in Capricorn, and so you're able to to decide what you need to do, and you do it, and you don't advertise the fact, and that should perhaps define your Friday. And as you go into the weekend, I think you're going to probably sort of want to continue with sort of a fairly sort of low profile approach, although the moon is going to be moving into Capricorn. Well, in fact, tomorrow the moon moves into Capricorn. The moon moving into Capricorn, that does create some change, and I think that does allow you to be sort of more assertive and more dynamic. But I'll be talking about that in my next video, which will be about this weekend. Aquarius. Nothing huge is going on except a new moon. I mean, different people respond to new moons in different ways at different times. And I think that this new moon is perhaps an end and a beginning. I do see this particular series of new moons as being about endings, and the reason is that these new moons are taking place, so late in the sign. We've just been getting it recently. It's late. Very late Sagittarius. So one thing is coming to an end, another thing is starting, and this might say something about how you relate to other people, society in general. You're maybe thinking about your social milieu, and whether or not it's constructive, and you may feel that it's not particularly constructive, that it's been holding you back, and has not given you everything you need, and so it's perhaps time for a change. And this new moon is square Saturn, and it's square Neptune as well. So it might occur to you that some aspects of your social life have just not been constructive, and they have maybe been limiting you. And so now with this new moon, you might want to create a change. If you change the scene, if you change the social furniture, that might well bring a change of luck. And when I think about a change of luck, I think that is it's going to be a fortunate event, and it might be that over the course of today and perhaps into the weekend, you have a chance to be in touch with new people, new groups of people who just represent something different, and they also represent how you are changing. As we change, yeah, so does our social environment. And so this could well be about how the new moon is going to unfold. The new moon also just allows you to think about who you are, and what your hopes are for the future. We all have hopes for the future. And, these hopes for the future can change. We have a different perspective. Maybe we become more realistic. Maybe we perhaps realize that we haven't been making the most of our potential. We've been just focusing on the wrong things. And so with this new moon, have another look at the future. Think about what is now going to happen, what is now going to unfold. How would you like things to be? And if you can do that, then you might be able to make some changes which might not always be easy. I mean, the sun and the moon, this whole new moon is making a square to Saturn. Saturn is your ruler, and when you look at the future, at the future you would like to live in, it seems slightly distant from your current reality. I mean, for example, there could be a financial side to it. There are all sorts of things you would like, but can you afford it? And you might then be of a view, well, if you can't afford it, you can't have it. But if something really belongs to you, there's always a way of finding it. And maybe it's not about money. There is a way of achieving what you need to achieve in an inspirational sense, without having to make huge changes to your financial circumstances. And perhaps money is a red herring. It's more about your resources, and resources. They take place. Well, resources exist at many different levels, and it's just not just money in the bank account. It's your knowledge, it's your experience, it's everything you are. And perhaps what you need to realize is that you do have what it takes. You really do have what it takes, and it's not just about writing a check. It's just about being yourself in its entirety. Perhaps there are things you haven't fully integrated yet, but with all these planets in Sagittarius is about integration. It's about bringing things together. And if you can bring things together, you'll realize that you have everything you need to lead the life you want to lead. Okay, that's sounds a bit dramatic. It's just a horoscope for one day. But I'm just encouraging you to make the most of the day's energies, and not to think that there is something that can't be done. If something is important, it's important, then there has to be a way. Absolutely. So, you have to be realistic, and you have to be realistic about which resources need to be brought into play. But you in the end, you do have what it takes to get to where you want to go. Pisces got a new moon. Okay, this new moon is today, Friday, if you're in the Americas. It's going to be tomorrow if you're not in the Americas. But the sun and the moon are in the same sign. So with a new moon, we're thinking about potentially a new start, a new beginning. And this new moon, this Sagittarius new moon that we get every year, from a Pisces perspective, may very well be about your ambitions, whatever it is that you want to get together. And perhaps you're thinking about 2026 now. Well, what would you like to achieve in 2026? That's perhaps the question of this new moon. And so it is a late new moon. It doesn't normally happen so late in December. The sun is almost in Capricorn, but not quite. And so this new moon allows you to align yourself to your ambitions, and you certainly shouldn't be distracted by the fact that it's nearly Christmas or the New Year. Other people might be slowing down, but that doesn't mean you have to slow down. And so Pisces, think about what it is that you that you want to do, that you want to put all your energy into. And in the process, it really matters that you are imaginative. Think about the possibilities. Think about what absolutely can be achieved, because right now a lot can be achieved, and you need to be able to take things as far as is possible. And this new moon is square Saturn, and I think that this square Saturn, I think that aspect allows you to make something real. So, don't just sort of drift off on a fantasy, just imagine how things could be. It can be. And perhaps that's the value of Saturn returning to your sign. So, when was it? Was it a couple of months ago? Saturn moved back into Pisces retrograde. I mean, it's now direct, but it will stay in Pisces until I think Valentine's Day, February the 14th. And so while Saturn is in Pisces, you have a chance to really get yourself together. And I think that this new moon square Saturn really allows you to do this. Also, we've got the beginnings of a square between Venus and Saturn. Now, Venus and Saturn normally is seen as being quite a difficult aspect, but I think this aspect can really allow you to be very, very focused. You can focus on the things that matter to you. In the process, you might be quite tough. Venus square Saturn. Venus is a planet that has a relationship to Pisces because Venus is exalted in Pisces, and so you can be tough. You can be clear about the way you want things to be, and if something needs to be done, you can make it. You can make it happen. But as far as toughness is concerned, it could be argued. But of all the 12 signs today, Pisces is the toughest. You are very resilient. You're not typically Pisces. I know that Pisces does have a reputation for going all over the place, but I'm not saying that's true, but it has a reputation for doing that. But you are not all over the place at all. You can be really, really focused on what you need. It's a Friday. It doesn't, just because it's a Friday doesn't mean that you have to, shut up shop, even though it's a Friday before Christmas. This new moon represents a new beginning, and the first half of that lunar cycle is still in 2025. So think about it. What needs to happen? You have the capacity, you have the ability, you have the discipline. So Pisces, really make the most of it. Make the most of those 4 planets in Sagittarius, because they are propelling you forward, and they're allowing you to take something which seems to be a fantasy, and you can make it real. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it is time to look at things from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 44, which is coming to meet. Now, this hexagram is, generally speaking, not regarded as being particularly fortunate. It represents something social, but something social which might restrict our freedom. We're dealing with perhaps another person, or maybe a situation. But if we allow this person or situation into our life, it could not just be disruptive, but it could really tie us up in knots. We could find that someone who seems to be harmless could just cause a load of problems. And so the general advice with coming to meet is that we should try to be independent. Our independence really matters, and there are considerable pressures to give up our independence. So I don't know what you're doing today, but if you're thinking about other people and bringing people into your life, particularly if people are keen to come into your life, maybe you need to have second thoughts, or people bothering you on the phone, asking you to agree to things, to sign up to things, trying to persuade you to give away your passwords and other details. Well, obviously, any time that needs to be avoided, but you have to not just avoid it. I'm not at all. Obviously, you should never give away passwords, important information. But there is pressure. There is pressure for you to give things away today, and that really does have to be resisted. And whoever is around you, you know, they could become a problem. It may start off very easily. You invite someone into your life, but once they're in your life, they don't go away. They just try to assert themselves, and you could so easily lose your independence. And so the question is, what do you do about it, and how does this particular situation, unfold? Well, we do have two moving lines, and the second line moves, and the second line, it talks about fish in a tank, and the fish in a tank are seen to be symbolic of something quite negative. And it's certainly true that goldfish can really mess up your independence. If I don't know if you've had that experience, but you buy a goldfish, it's what they call it, a feeder fish, and I don't know, you can buy them for 25 cents or whatever, and you buy this goldfish, and you don't really think what you're doing, and then 10 years later you've got a 40-gallon tank with goldfish in it. It can happen, yeah. The same goldfish are still there. All my goldfish are dead now, but I did have. I think we had a lot of goldfish. I bought them ages. We bought them ages ago. You just buy them and they just don't go away, and then they require sort of more and more effort, and then you realize that goldfish have got rights too, and you try your hardest, and they're all gone now. But a goldfish can last for 40 years. So anyway, it talks about fish, and so fish have to be kept in their tank, and the fish is a sort of symbolic of an influence that potentially could be negative, and you have to keep it in one place. Now that might be, for example, about someone you know. You know one group of people, you know another group of people. But one group of people, you might have a sort of fairly negative view of them, but you tolerate them. That often happens, doesn't it? But what you mustn't do is you mustn't mix. You mustn't mix one social grouping with another social grouping. One social grouping can contaminate another and can cause real trouble. So keep your friends apart. Keep your groups of friends apart. Particularly those people who you tolerate. There are always people like that, aren't there? You tolerate them. They're problematic, but they can be harmless if they're treated properly. But people can get out of control. Then we have the fifth line moving, and with the fifth line moving, the fifth line is quite fortunate, and the indication here is that there is a way of dealing with the situation. We don't have to give in to anyone, but we just have to be careful. So I think we are able to maintain our independence, but it could be touch and go. So however we're dealing with our social life and the people around us, we just have to be careful, and we do always have to remember our boundaries, because they do matter. Although on a positive note with this fifth line moving, it does seem that in the end we can have an influence, and perhaps that's part of it. even the inferior elements can be influenced. If we make a real effort, and somehow, in the end, we can get through to people. So maybe someone who seems to be bad news on the surface, we can maybe just sort of transform the situation and get the respect we deserve, and that way we can protect ourselves from being overwhelmed. Now, this hexagram 44 does move because we've got two moving lines, and it moves to hexagram number 56, which is the Wanderer. So the Wanderer is probably telling us how it all works out in the end. And the Wanderer is quite independent. Well, is the Wanderer independent? But Wanderer is certainly detached. But the Wanderer is somewhere wandering somewhere that it's not entirely familiar with. Yeah, not on secure ground. So it's independent of its own home. The Wanderer is independent, of his own home. But at the same time, the Wanderer may be very dependent on the people the Wanderer meets in the strange land it's walking through. And so, given the previous hexagram, we do get a feeling of distance. And so coming to meet the previous hexagram just might be all of the people we have to deal with, we have to interact with. And in the end, we want our independence. And in order to get our independence, we may just have to leave. There's a feeling of moving away, perhaps even forcing ourselves to move onto strange territory in order to find our independence. But of course, when you're on strange territory, you are dependent in another way, because you're not on familiar grounding. So it might in the end be necessary to put oneself in a situation where one just doesn't know what's going on in order to get away from something. And it's kind of fitting that we've got a new moon build up to a new moon. New moon is the end of one cycle, beginning of a new cycle. And so with this end of one cycle, there could very well be a social element to it. We feel that we have to get away from something, and we have to become a wanderer, because that represents the future. And of course, as a wanderer, you're always looking for a home. The I Ching makes that point very, very clear. And so the new moon, in terms of the I Ching, is about the end of one thing, perhaps having a strong social element, and deciding enough is enough. Maybe that means sort of ditching a load of friendships, or at least distancing oneself from certain people in order to be able to find something new, and perhaps also to be able to find our freedom. And now I want to look at the new moon. So there is a new moon today or tomorrow. So let's look at this. Let's look at the chart of this new moon. Again, I'm sorry about the thumbnail image, because that thumbnail image is not actually of a new moon. It's of a moon at a sort of slightly later stage in the cycle when you can start to see it. But I suppose I could have just put a black square on the top right, but that wouldn't have looked great. But so let's see here. So here's the chart of the new moon. Here it is. This time round, I've set the new moon for New York rather than London, just to emphasize the point that the new moon does take place today, Friday, if you're in the Americas. So this new moon takes place New York, Washington time at sort of 8:43 p.m. And of course, if you're not in the Americas, it will be tomorrow. It will be sort of tomorrow morning at some stage. London time, the new moon is at 1:43 a.m. So there is a sort of a time zone element to it. So this new moon is in very late Sagittarius at 28:25 Sagittarius, and it does represent a new beginning, but it is in very late signs. It's very late in the sign, and so because it's very late in the sign, as I've been saying about this series of lunations, it kind of feels like a full moon. as well as a new moon. It is the end of something as well as the beginning, because just pretty much immediately after the new moon we've got the solstice, and that might in itself be relevant. When you've got a new moon so close to the solstice, that might indicate some kind of change. It's like a transition. And you could say that the solstice point is pretty close to the new moon Mars midpoint. I mean, I'll be looking at that in a moment. And so this new moon is it's conjunct Venus. It's square Neptune. It's square Saturn. And I mean, the square Neptune is perhaps something that is really worth noting. I mean, it's this new moon could well be about uncertainty, just not being sure. And of course, also with Moon square Neptune, we think of water damage. It's Neptune in Pisces, so things could go wrong. When sort of water is involved. Now that could be weather events, over the next couple of weeks, maybe over the next week. So that's certainly a way of looking at it. I mean, I think it was when it was the tsunami. The tsunami was the end of 2004. So it was 21 years ago was the big tsunami, that dreadful tsunami. I'm sure you remember it if you're, I don't know, above the age of, certainly if you're above the age of 30, you'll remember that tsunami. It was very dramatic and very horrific. So that was 21 years ago. I'm not saying there is going to be a tsunami, but the tsunami, water damage, doing anything connected with water, I think that is, potentially a bad idea. And Neptune, okay, it may not be exactly on skeet, but it's close enough. I mean, late Pisces is often seen as a part of the sky very much sort of linked with water, particularly with Neptune there. Neptune has an association with the sign Pisces. I don't think Neptune doesn't rule Pisces, in my opinion. Jupiter does, but it certainly has an association. And this new moon is square it. The new moon is also square Saturn, and so it kind of picks up the whole Saturn-Neptune conjunction feel. So the new moon is a time of uncertainty. And it also has a social aspect to it, because this new moon is tied up with Venus, and the moon is also additionally is in mutual reception to Jupiter, and so that's the moon is not entirely weak here. So conjunct Venus in mutual reception to Jupiter, it could be that the new moon represents a new beginning in certain relationships, but because of the connection with Saturn, it might be about a relationship becoming stronger. The Saturn feeling that obligations are necessary, or it could be about becoming aware of obligations. What obligations does a relation bring, and to what extent are you able to sort of deal with those obligations? So that is a way in which this new moon could work. And additionally, the new moon is tied up with Uranus. We forget those quincunxes. It's very easy to forget the quincunxes, not to notice it, but it's pretty close, because this new moon is at 28-25 Sag, and so you've got Uranus at 28-19 Taurus, so very close, only 100, over the 150 degree aspect. So there is a Uranus feel here, and with that Uranus, we have to be thinking hard about where might that Uranus manifest, how might it manifest, is there going to be any sense of drama to this new moon, drama, accidents. I'm always sort of a bit wary of this. I'm becoming wary of this. I talk about these new moons and full moons pretty regularly, and there is a temptation to over dramatize. And you see these wonderful link-ups with Uranus and whatever, and nothing happens. I mean, there's always something happening. I mean, if I was being dishonest, I could just take any event and just link it with the new moon and say, well, didn't I get that right? Well, I think you need to have a sense of skepticism here. You can trip yourself up, and human beings are meaning machines, and so I think one does have to be careful about making dramatic predictions just on the basis of a new moon. But still, I do think that quincunx with Uranus, does matter, and I'll be trying to look at it when I look at the astrocartography. So that's a new moon. Just looking at the chart, and if we look at the midpoints that the new moon is concerned, so let's look at the 90-degree dial. Here it is. Here that's not the 90-degree dial. Here is the 90-degree dial. So there is, by the way, there is the Aries point. So if we look at the Aries point right now, this is something I hadn't actually noticed, which is not directly related to the new moon, but notice how the Aries point at the moment is on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. And having the Aries point on the Mars-Saturn midpoint at the time of the full moon is potentially quite dangerous. Aries on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Well, you think about it. Aries is the global point. It represents the world. It's on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Mars-Saturn, it's the death axis, and you might get the sense of tragedy or frustration, and perhaps people who have Aries on the Mars-Saturn midpoint are going to be particularly sensitive to this. I mean, for example, the Ukrainian president Vladimir Zelensky, he has Aries. I think his Aries point is sesquiquadrate his Mars-Saturn midpoint, I think, but he's certainly got Aries. The Aries point making a hard aspect to the Mars-Saturn aspect, so to the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So maybe that's going to influence him. And maybe he resonates to Aries on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So who knows what's going on in Ukraine? Whatever's going on in Ukraine, it's not very good. It's not good for Vladimir Zelensky. So that might be something he has to be careful about. The Aries point is relatively close to the Sun-Mars midpoint and the Sun-Moon midpoint. So there's certainly things to note about the Aries point. And of course, this chart is set for Washington D.C. So if we set the new moon, if we ask ourselves what's going on in Washington D.C., where it's not just Aries on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, but we've got Aries is aspecting the ascendant midheaven midpoint, sort of the time and the place, and so that might indicate that, as far as Washington being a capital of the United States, that the United States may be getting itself involved in something that maybe it shouldn't be. And we do think about the problems and the issues of that Mars-Saturn pairing. And turning to the Sun-Moon aspect itself, what aspects is the Sun? So the Sun-Moon midpoint. Sorry, the Sun and the Moon are both on the Venus-Mars midpoint. So on the Venus-Mars midpoint, well, I mean, that could, on a personal level, it is about attractiveness and people trying to attract each other, and it can be perhaps quite a charismatic new moon because it is on the Venus-Mars midpoint, and it may be a good new moon on an individual level for attracting, for trying to look attractive, trying to get attention. Though we shouldn't forget that Venus is square Saturn. The question is, why does one want to attract? Is there a reason? I mean, Venus square Saturn can be quite a transactional aspect. So that's those are a few thoughts about the 90-degree dial, and then I wanted to look at the astrocartography. So let's do the astro map display. Where is it? Okay, so let's start off by looking at the astromap for the world. So the question is, what places on Earth is the sun and the moon rising? So here are the places where the sun and the moon are rising. It sort of goes through India, it goes through Siberia. Because the sun and the moon, sort of Mars will be rising as well. So it could be that it has an impact on India in a general sense. I mean, India it may not be such a bad influence for India. It may be something about the way India presents itself to the world. Although we also have at the time of a new moon, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is on the IC, going through. Looks as if that's going through parts of sort of India and certainly Pakistan. So India might, in a general sense, be somewhere to look out for. Then there is Uranus. Remember, Uranus is on the midheaven. Sorry, not Uranus on the midheaven. Uranus is quincunx the sun. So the Uranus is quincunx this new moon. And so I think it might be valid to look at places where Uranus is on the midheaven. And so here is the Uranus on the midheaven line, and it goes through through eastern Canada, and it does go through South America. It does go through Buenos Aires. Now, is that going to hit Venezuela? I mean, it goes through a part of Venezuela, and we know that Venezuela is really on the brink at the moment with Trump's blockade. I think I'm going to look at Venezuela again quite quickly, and I did want to sort of talk about this Nobel Prize, this Venezuelan woman who got the Nobel Peace Prize, and Julian Assange is now is taking legal action in Sweden because clearly this woman is not worthy of the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, she's sort of advocating war, advocating American intervention. This is not someone who should be getting the Nobel Peace Prize. But I think we perhaps need to look at this, and maybe in my next video I'll be looking at Julian Assange and having another look at Venezuela. And so, yeah, we can see how this Venus quincunx, the Sun quincunx Uranus may have an effect on South America, and also Australia. I will talk about Australia in a moment, but this new moon is on the midheaven in eastern Australia, which of course goes through sort of Sydney and Canberra, the capital of Australia, and I will look at that now. So let me just start off by relocating this chart to Caracas. So here's the chart for Caracas. To what extent does a new moon affect Caracas? Well, of course, distances are big in Venezuela. Uranus is actually pretty far off the midheaven here. I mean, it's still in the 10th house, and so you could say the new moon is quincunx Uranus. Uranus is Uranus on the midheaven, so that may say something about leadership in Venezuela, the kind of pressures that Maduro might be under. And again, Maduro's chart, I was criticized, I think, if I understand it rightly, for not mentioning Maduro's horoscope in my last video. I think I will be looking at Maduro's horoscope in my next video. Or we might want to relocate this chart to Buenos Aires. I don't know how Millet is doing. So here is. So if we do reset the chart, this new moon to Buenos Aires, the capital of Argentina, the Uranus is exactly on the midheaven. And I think that that might well be relevant given the fact that the new moon is quincunx Uranus. So I'm thinking that there may be events in Argentina, perhaps political events. Things are unstable in Argentina. Milei, chainsaw man, taking a chainsaw to the government, and he was effective up to a point, and then it started to go wrong, and then Trump gave him $20 billion, and that seemed to help. But there may be fresh trouble in Argentina. But it might not be political. It might be events in Argentina that don't have a political nature. But it just may be that the whole of South America, that line, Uranus on the midheaven line, going through South America. Maybe we should be looking at the places where the line is line is exact. And then there is Australia, and so if we do an astromap of the new moon and we set it for Australia, you can see what I mean. Okay, so I hope that's not going to give us too many lines. So here it is. So here's Australia. So you can see that the new moon is exact. This is where the new moon is exactly on the midheaven, and it goes through eastern Australia. I think that's is that Brisbane? It goes through. But it's close enough to Sydney and Canberra, and also if you set the chart for Canberra, you see that Saturn is exactly on the ascendant, and you're going to have Venus on the midheaven. Maybe sort of Tasmania might be involved as well. So, given what has happened in Australia, given the Bondi Beach sort of massacre, this may be talking about potentially the political aftershocks of it. There may be some new political crisis. It may have nothing to do with Bondi Beach, but I do think that if there is one part of the world that might be particularly affected by the new moon, I do think it could be Australia. And if we do look at the relocated chart, so here's the new moon relocated for Canberra, and Venus is exactly on the midheaven. So Venus on the midheaven, well, that's interesting because Venus is, of course, a planet connected with women. So it could represent an Australian woman who maybe hits the news, becomes prominent. I'm going to make a suggestion in a moment, but so that may be one way it works, but you can also see that Saturn is exactly on the ascendant because you've got this Venus-Saturn square. So it could be a sort of a Venus-Saturn kind of figure becoming prominent. So and Saturn Neptune as well. So it is a potentially quite difficult chart for Australia, but sort of interesting certainly. And the new moon is again, it's quite close to the midheaven. So as far as any person, one person to talk about, just bear in mind, I don't know anything about Australian politics, so I'm not really in a position to make serious suggestions. But one Australian politician who I've heard about for a long time, but I don't know much about her. And someone suggested in the comments I look at her chart, so I'm going to look at her chart, is Pauline Hanson. So Pauline Hanson, she's been on the political scene, I know, in Australia for a very long time. And I think, she ran a fish and chip shop, is that right? And then she got involved in sort of right-wing politics. And she is currently a senator from Queensland, and she was born in Brisbane, and so if I've got that right, the new moon was exactly on the midheaven in Brisbane. Um, it's so in her birthplace, so that does give her extra prominence up now. But she has been around for a long time. She's just turned 71, so it's not that old, 71. It's young enough to be able to make waves politically. I think she got banned recently from the Australian Parliament for wearing a burqa, is that right? Or mocking the burqa. I don't know what she was doing, but clearly she has an issue with immigration. And that is part of her political platform as sort of one nation. And she does have an interesting chart. She's got Saturn right on the ascendant, and that Saturn in Scorpio. It's a very, very strong chart with that Saturn in Scorpio on the ascendant. And what makes it important is the fact that Saturn is in mutual reception to Mars. So Saturn in Scorpio on its own could have been a problem for sort of Pauline Hanson, but because she's got a mutual reception between Mars and Saturn, I think that really strengthens that Saturn. It allows her to just keep going, and so here she is at 71 years old. She's there. Her profile has clearly increased over the last few weeks, and already before the Bondi Beach massacre, people were saying that the right in, well, of course, the media likes to say the far right, the right in Australia has really getting more support. It may be sort of resurgent, and of course, the Bondi Beach massacre is going to really intensify it. And if you look at her chart, she has got her midheaven at 22 degrees 56 Cancer. So she's got Jupiter exactly on her midheaven. Now, Jupiter on the midheaven, it can work in different ways. I mean, I like to say that Jupiter on the midheaven can be about the end of a job or the beginning of a job. But with Jupiter on her midheaven, this is likely to really increase her profile, because Jupiter retrogrades over the midheaven, then it goes direct, then it goes back over the midheaven. So given Jupiter's on her midheaven, and she's got the resilience of Saturn on her ascendant, I don't think that she's going away. And if you look at her chart, she's got Jupiter in Cancer anyway. She's got quite a strong Jupiter really on the Aries point in Cancer. So I think it's certainly an interesting chart. It's great that there is a time of birth for Pauline Hanson, and I somehow think that this new moon kind of helps sort of bring her into focus, and I think it may just be the case that the new moon is on Brisbane, is on the midheaven at Brisbane. It is her birthday. It is her birthplace, and she does have Jupiter. She does have transiting Jupiter on her midheaven, and she's going to have a Mars return soon because she's got Mars in Capricorn. Mars conjunct the North Node in Capricorn. So whatever you think of her, at some level, her approach seems to be in accord with her own destiny, and her Mars return, she's already feeling that as well. Of course, some people hate her. I'm sure a lot of people think she's great. She's got Venus-Mars opposition here, Mars in Capricorn opposition Venus in Cancer, and so this sort of position in Australia, some people thinking she's great, other people really hating her. That's the nature of having a Venus-Mars opposition. That's what Venus-Mars is about. It can be attractive. It can also be repulsive. So I think that this new moon, if I were to say, but if it were to affect anywhere, I would have said Australia, because it really is angular in eastern Australia and close to the Australian capital. So that's it with this new moon. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again very soon.